Up next, we have Roger from Peak AIO and Greg from Solidigm. They're going to be discussing cracking AI's storage bottleneck.
All right, continuing on the subject of how hardware, infrastructure, and other solutions will help grow AI in enterprise. This session will talk a little bit about innovations in storage technology and how it enables enterprise use cases. So once again, I'm Michael Stewart, Managing Partner at M12, and I'd like my panelists to introduce themselves.
Roger Cummings, CEO of Peak AIO.
And Greg Mattson, I'm Head of Products and Marketing for Solidigm.
So we just came out of a panel talking a little bit about where value is created and the value basis for AI inference. Really, the toughest questions in this is how to activate big enterprise. Their concerns are higher, the problems are harder. And really, if you look to some of these regulated industries that need AI, there's a lot of value to be created by AI. One of the hardest nuts to crack is really in healthcare. And we have an interesting case study to discuss here. Why don't you take it away, Roger, and talk a little bit about how AI and how storage technology is enabling more use of AI in healthcare.
Got it. So we were very fortunate to be very early on working with King's College in London. And Professor Sebastian Orselin, who was one of the founders of MONAI, allowed us to come in and work with him to develop this MONAI framework. And the MONAI framework is for medical imaging to build medical imaging faster, more safer, and secure. And when we were working with him, it wasn't about a super pod or a base pod or anything conversation at all. It was about how do we empower these researchers and scientists to prove innovation very, very quickly. So we worked very well with Professor Orselin to be that underlying infrastructure that allowed the researchers and allowed these doctors and biologists in life science to build on top of this framework very quickly and to have allow them to move this innovation very quickly through the framework.
And Greg?
Yeah, we partner with Roger on this, and we are a leading provider of very high-capacity solid-state storage solutions for both cloud, enterprise computing, as well as AI. And some of the things that we were able to bring to the table for this medical use case, which is really typical of an edge AI use case, maybe even the most stringent or one of the more stringent edge AI use cases, is super high capacity storage that's very power efficient but also very performant. And what that enabled MONAI to do is actually store over 2 million full body CT scans on a single node within their IT environment, which is typical of an edge AI deployment, very space constrained, power constrained, and the very high capacity storage enabled some fairly remarkable results.
Yeah, and to dovetail on that, the pace of change for how enterprise AI applications are architected has been furious. Speaking again from an investor for Microsoft, one of the few clear use cases we've seen that big enterprise loves is RAG, is retrieval augmented generation. And for that, even how it's built and how it's connected to databases and infrastructure is changing very fast. How do the two of you think your industry is keeping up with that?
Oh, I guess I go first. Well, it's actually a challenge. And what we've seen is really a bifurcation of types of storage hardware that are tailored to certain types of use cases, depending on where they are in the AI data pipeline. And so the type of use case that we talked about with MONAI, an edge use case, as well as kind of the feeding of a training cluster are well served by very, very high capacity solid state storage solutions. But the actual inference and model training really needs something different. And that is a very high performance, very high I/O per second, requirement from the SSD. And that's really to feed the HBM, to feed the GPU. So it's really, for us, RAG is kind of bifurcating the types of products that we make and the types of integrations that we have to make with the software.
Yeah, and So our role in that is we're a software-defined layer. So Peak AIO is a software-defined layer that you could put on any commodity server and turn it into a high-performance server for AI or HPC workloads. But when we're talking about edge, we can do we do that. We can do it down, scale it down to a single node. So it's bringing that inference down to closer to the data. And when you're dealing at MONAI, whether it's a lab, a remote lab, or when we're trying to save hedgehogs, right, in remote cameras out there.
Got to get the hedgehog slide in here.
Yeah, get the hedgehog. You need hedgehogs, right? So this was a great example, but it's really is bringing that inference closer to the edge. And it's also, what's really key here is removing those bottlenecks, those memory bottlenecks. And what happens is we, through Peak, we've made your memory a part of that AI infrastructure. And that's a really key thing too, because a lot of times we don't think of memory as infrastructure. So we have some capabilities to scale that memory and that workspace along with your data and metadata associated with it. So that makes a key differentiated value to customers out there that don't want to or can't, due to cost and space, to rerun those models over and over again. So we keep those tokens alive for you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to validate a couple of the things you said about the time to insight and the proximity of data to where the compute is. I think another thing we've observed from where we sit at the fund is seeing data's attitude toward, enterprise's attitude toward where data resides has not changed at the rate of the AI models and the infrastructure. In fact, like that's almost stayed stationary. If there was like a unifying force in the universe, you know, that's like gravity, data gravity is the unifying force of AI. Nothing takes a higher precedence in what we've seen for customer preference than not touching where that data is. And I wanted to turn to you and ask, have you seen that kind of cloud on-prem sensitivity affect how your products are developed, and how does it change about future use cases of AI? Are we ever going to get over this, or do you encompass this in your products?
I guess I'll answer that from our side. But I think we heard a little bit today. You have to be more intelligent about the AI workloads. You can't be just a destination. You have to understand the workloads. We do some incredible technology with Solidigm and their infrastructure to be smarter on how that data is processed. We started as how do we get performance out of a single node? So with inference being such a large push now, we've seen this movie before, right? We've seen generalists come to and become specialized. And we've now are taking that work that we've done from a single node and pushing it closer to that data, be more efficient. We want more intelligent data, right? And the only way to do that is get closer to that data.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you know, you see all the big, the huge deployments, the big greenfield data centers for AI specific utilize very specific hardware designs to be able to bring the data as close as possible to the GPUs. And so they've been building out their data centers with all solid state storage and very, very high capacity solid state storage to bring petabyte level storage, very accessible at very high speeds to the GPUs. Now, that same technology is basically happening at a microcosm at the edge and in the enterprise. And so it's becoming critical to purchasers of AI systems and how you select your hardware and how you select your system vendor even, to make sure that if you want to get the most performance out of your system, that you're running it on all solid state. And that allows you to bring huge amounts of data, like the MONAI example. We didn't talk about the number of images of hedgehogs, but it was 15 million plus images in a single system. And that enables then incredible processing power right there in a small system at the edge.
Yeah, and you want those annotation applications. Actually, it was Microsoft application that they used to improve the annotation and improve the understanding and intelligence of those images as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comment on on the outcome, the value of the outcome, feeding into decisions about the infrastructure we buy.
Yeah.
I think the next question I wanted to tie back to the AI factory discussion we had a few minutes ago, and this is, again, the hyperscalers, the neo clouds, even the more sophisticated AI forward customers building their own infrastructure. Talk a little bit about what the future looks like, both on the software and the hardware level, for as we build out an efficient, cost-appropriate AI for these new use cases. How does the technology mutate?
I think it's our role as vendors also at the stage that we're at with AI is to optimize things, to make things more cost effective. And I think it's imperative that we provide solutions that are open source, scalable, can scale out, and at memory speed, and utilize some of the latest and greatest technology out there to do that. And that's really our goal as a company, is to provide that openness, that speed, and the scale that organizations need. And I think you're going to see the economies match that as well.
And you know, speaking of kind of openness and speed, but also specialized, you know, products for specialized things. And I know the last panel talked about that somewhat. But you know, even within this very simplified, you know, the overall data, you know, training and inference data pipeline, but even within inference itself, there's different needs from a hardware perspective. And you know, whether it's a very high-speed SSD or a very high-capacity solution that's power efficient, that's going to keep increasing. And you know, I would say move even further towards the very, very high capacity. You know, whether it's a 1 petabyte SSD, you know, out in a couple of years from now, that runs at very low power, and that can take up, you know, basically replace, you know, 4 times as many hard drives, or a very, very, very high capacity, or sorry, performance product that really is almost near memory type speeds. And you know, you'll see that you know, the big GPU vendors are looking at how do we define the next storage architecture so that it really can, you know, help augment, you know, very closely the HBM in the system. And so what was kind of a general purpose SSD and cloud computing is now bifurcating into capacity and performance, and I think we'll keep doing that, you know, even further out in both directions over the next, you know, 5 to 10 years.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and actually, if I tied that back to the value discussion that we had a few minutes ago too, again, if you're leading with some of these applications that are like medical analysis or pathology or X-rays, or areas where there's like a defined payoff. One question we are trying to struggle with is, like, if you have this Pareto curve of AI's cost versus what the customers are willing to pay, what we gathered was they just need more capacity in one part of the Pareto curve. There's another part of the Pareto curve where they may be discovering the price. What you guys are talking about is definitely higher up in the Pareto curve. They know the price, they're willing to pay more for it. What are the industries your products reach next? So again, you're starting with what's hardest with the MONAI example. What do you enable from here?
Well, I think, you know, first is right now we talked about supply chain, or I think I heard the previous panel talk about supply chain, and I think we're still ramping very hard on, you know, supplying the huge AI deployments, you know, that we're all reading about every day, and just, I think, getting to enterprise and edge. You know, we have the MONAI example and a few others examples that we're kind of actively building out, but it really feels still like we're scratching the very surface of real enterprise deployments of on-prem AI systems. I know for our company right now, we're still working through your company, and there's no on-prem happening. And so I think it's, you know, it's how do we start there? But you know, really for optimal performance and efficiency, some level of on-prem needs to be there.
Yeah, and I would add something to that is simplicity, right? We heard folks talk about lack of people. We all have that problem, and we have to make the system simple. Not only just simple to manage, simple to use, but to manage, to scale, to implement, We need to go to partners, GPU as a service partners, or service providers, systems integrators, and make our solutions simpler for organizations to use. That's our goal that we have. It's our goal to start small in many cases. AI within the enterprise sometimes is a department, right? Sometimes it's a new hire. But we have to make it simple, consumable, and allow folks to scale with a value to a price to value ratio.
Great. Yeah, I mean, one more theme I wanted to bring into this and get your take is certainly you're talking about accessibility and ease of use. We always look at that as not at the cost of security. And I'm sure, again, for both of you coming from enterprise and technology background, how is the security question built into your products? How are you thinking of the challenges going forward? Because we're seeing in a number of the pure security spaces in AI this expanding attack surface.
Yep.
On the other hand, you have to have absolute security for the customer's data with your hardware and software products.
For us, it's all about provenance of data, right? Where does the data come from? We'll partner. We're never going to come up with the complete security solution out there, but we're going to partner, we're going to build, and we're going to provide the information necessary to protect the data. And we need, for our solution, we track the provenance of data to and from. We understand how that data is used and the complete chain of where that data is and how it's used.
Yeah, and for us as drive providers, we really have to protect the data that resides on the drive. And so today's technologies of self-encrypting drives, of FIPS certification if you're selling into government or certain enterprise applications are good, but as we're migrating towards the future, we're looking at post-quantum cryptography. It's coming soon, and it's requirements, from our largest cloud customers, but also enterprise customers over the next few years. And so, advancing and protecting the data on the drive, with multiple keys and all the different techniques is critical. As well as once the drive leaves the enterprise or needs to be dispositioned, advancing the secure erase technologies that completely eliminate the data on the drive.
Yeah. And we're doing some great things in that space together as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's actually wonderful to bring in this question of storage into the AI conversation. I think it's not appreciated enough. It sounds like you're really actually, besides succeeding business-wise, you're actually blazing the trail for what AI can do. So
we're cool again.
We're trying.
Thank you very much for your perspective.
Thank you very much.